Hey there. So, if you are self-employed borrowers, can you qualify for mortgage? What are the documents that you need if you want to qualify for a mortgage? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Hey there, this is a KG with Fairfax Realty in Greenbelt, where we help buyers to buy their dream home and sellers to sell their houses. And we do this in the Maryland, DC, and Virginia region. So if you're looking to buy, sell, or move in the Maryland, DC, or Virginia region, to contact us below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get updates once we upload new videos. So today I'm continuing my conversation with Deanna, one of my favorite go-to lenders. So we're talking about self-employed people. We have a lot of people that are self-employed. So can you apply for a mortgage? What are the documents that are needed if you want to apply for a mortgage? And what are the different home mortgage available for you as a self-employed? So I'm talking to Deanna today. So Deanna, introduce yourself one more time.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deanna Furman, and I'm a VP of Mortgage Lending with Guaranteed Rate. I am based out of Maryland, but I'm also licensed in not only Maryland, also Pennsylvania, DC, and Virginia.
All
And
right.
thank you for having me here today,
Oh,
Keji.
anytime, Deanna. I love working with you. So let's talk about self-employed borrower. Who is considered a self-employed borrower?
So, Keji, anyone that has 25% ownership interest or greater in a company is technically deemed as self-employed in the mortgage world.
Okay.
And that could be whether someone just has their own business as a sole proprietorship, an LLC, or an S Corp.
Mhm.
Self-employed borrowers are also employees who receive a 1099 from their employer rather than a W-2.
Okay. So that covers everybody. Okay. So for somebody that is self-employed, that have 1099, they file their taxes and stuff like that. What kind of mortgage, when you compare it to somebody that have W-2, what kind of mortgage uh, loans are available for them?
Very good question. I mean, comparable mortgage programs are available. It's really just a difference of the documentation requirements that are going to vary when comparing someone that's self-employed versus someone who is not self-employed. So, your traditional, conventional, jumbo, FHA, and VA loans are all going to be available.
Oh, okay. So they are not restricted because you're self-employed, you cannot do FHA. No, that's not the case.
No, I mean, there are a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, conventional, jumbo, FHA, and VA.
Okay, very good. Okay, so let me give you a scenario because this happen a lot now, even in this economy, that people are doing side gig and then working their regular jobs. So if somebody is doing a side gig, maybe driving a Uber or doing a DoorDash and getting
Mhm.
1099, but then still work their regular job, uh, how will they be treated if they're applying for a mortgage?
And I do see this a lot, Keji. So basically, it's at the applicant's discretion as to if they want to include the side job on the application or not. Typically, a 2-year history of receiving that income is going to be required in
Uh,
order to use that income for qualification purposes. So, for conventional financing specifically, if an applicant does not disclose that self-employed income on the application, then there's really no need for all of the other documents
okay.
that we'll get into in just a little bit.
Mhm.
Versus a government loan, if it is known that there is a business owned, whether it's a side business or a primary, then all of the documentation will be needed to process the mortgage.
Oh, okay. So even if let's talk about the government loan in a minute. So even if somebody is doing a side job, I mean side gig, and
Mhm.
maybe that income is coming in on their bank statement, they have to, even if they don't want to use that income, they have to account for it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it is going to have to be accounted for, and the tax returns are going to be needed to be reviewed and analyzed. That's
Okay.
correct. And
Okay.
we'll get into all the ins and outs of the specifics with regards to the documentation as well.
Okay. So I guess what is the biggest difference between somebody that is a W-2 employee and self-employed? I mean, what is the biggest difference in applying for a mortgage?
Well, it's going to be the documentation requirements, and that's
Okay.
because, when someone owns their own company or they're 1099, they have the advantage of claiming business-related expenses on their tax returns.
Okay, so like we discussed even before now, you said the documentation is always going to be the biggest what you're going to provide. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the biggest difference when comparing self-employed borrowers versus W-2 borrowers is the documentation. Absolutely.
Okay, so we want to talk about the different documentation that will be required. I'm going to pull it up in a minute so that everybody can see the documentation that is required. Just give me a second. Okay, so Deanna, this is the documents that you were talking about for self-employed person
Yes.
versus somebody that is W-2. So let's go through this document. This is the first one you said standard self-employed borrower documentation requirements. Can you walk through that?
Absolutely. So underwriting is going to require the most recent 2 years worth of filed tax returns.
Mhm.
Okay. So whether you file your business income on your personal tax returns,
Mhm.
or if you have an S Corp or an LLC and file both business and personal tax returns, then
Mhm.
both of those will be required. So it
Okay.
really depends upon number one, the type of company, and number two, how the tax returns are being filed. Again, if it's an individual side business, odds are the applicant's going to be filing the business income on their personal tax returns or 1040s.
Okay.
And then if it's an LLC or an S Corp, they're going to be business tax returns and K1s in addition to the personal tax returns. So number one, most recent 2 years worth of tax returns, all schedules signed. In addition to
Mhm.
the tax returns, a year-to-date profit and loss statement is going to be required. So for example purposes, we're in the month of March.
Mhm.
Not everyone has filed their 2020 taxes yet. They technically have until April 15th to either file their taxes or file for an extension through October,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So let's say I'm self-employed. I've filed my 2020 tax returns. Great. So I'm going to have my 2020 tax returns, my 2019 tax returns, all schedules. In addition, the profit and loss statement, let's say through the end of February, because we're halfway through the month of March right now.
Okay.
That profit and loss statement doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can
Okay.
be run through QuickBooks. It can be a document that the applicant generates themselves, or it
Okay.
can be from a CPA,
Okay.
just showing month over month the revenue generated through the company and the anticipated expenses.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in addition to the most recent 2 years tax returns, excuse me, and the year-to-date profit and loss statement, in addition to that, there are going to need to be 2 months worth of bank statements, the most recent 2 months. And those bank statements are going to need to coincide with that profit and loss statement.
Okay.
Another very important note on this is that the profit and loss statement
Mm.
and the bank statements can be no later than 60 days from the note date. So if someone is doing a refinance,
Okay.
odds are, they're going to provide their tax returns, their profit and loss, their bank statements,
Mhm.
and they're most likely going to go to settlement before those documents expire.
Yes.
With a purchase, with a pre-approval specifically, if someone's looking to purchase a home, they haven't identified the home yet, but they just want to get the process started,
Mhm.
just know that, we don't know if you're going to go under contract this weekend or if it's going to take several months to find the right house. And just remember that that documentation is date sensitive, and you might have to turn around and provide more current profit and loss and updated bank statements.
Okay, so definitely, if you're doing a pre-approval, I want to purchase, you want to keep that rolling. If if this month you what you provided is just up to February profit and loss, when you get to the end of March, you really want to keep your documentation so that when that time comes, if you find a house, you can provide updated profit and loss as well as bank statement, right?
That's right. And it's not like every month I'm going to call you up and say, time for a new P&L and a new bank statement. No, that would be Brett, that would be very time consuming and stressful, but
Uh,
at least upfront for the initial pre-approval, I always recommend if you're willing, able, and comfortable with it, let's get everything verified up front. Let's get the tax returns and the P&L and the bank statements over to underwriting upfront. That way there aren't any surprises later on down the road. If it takes a couple of months to go under contract and or find the right house, it is what it is. And then we go through the process a second time based upon, the contingency dates in the contract.
okay, okay. You just said something right now, like let's get everything upfront. And that's why I like to work with you, Deanna, because I don't want any surprise. Get everything upfront, pre-approved, go through the documents and the writing to make sure there's not going to be any surprise at the back. I mean, it's not your pre-approval is worth nothing if nothing is it's not verified upfront, right?
That's exactly right. And specific to business owners, if you're thinking about buying a house this year and you want to get the pre-approval process started, I highly, highly, highly recommend before submitting the application, make sure you have all of the documentation on this checklist, which I'm happy I send this to all of my clients that are self-employed upfront. Make sure you have the whole package together and ready to go, because the moment you submit the application, the credits run, the clock starts ticking, and the last thing you want to do is then have to go back to your CPA, ask them to prepare and provide you with a P&L, and they're busy and it's going to take them 2 to 3 weeks to get that paperwork together for you. So that's why I always encourage, if you're self-employed and you want to get the process started, make sure you have all the documents together first.
It makes sense. That's why we have this checklist, right? So go through it and then you can make sure you have everything. So let's talk about the bank statement. You said they would need bank statement. So does it have to be a business bank statement or a personal bank statement?
I mean, it's at the applicant's discretion, honestly, but if the business is separated from the personal, that just makes it easier to look at the expenses versus the revenue coming in.
Okay, okay, okay. So and
I've
then,
seen both,
yeah,
honestly, but it does get a little bit complicated with
complicated, especially if you
a
are sole
personal account.
proprietor and you're running everything together with your
Yeah.
personal and business. Okay, okay. The other thing that you said is the profit and loss must match the bank statement. What are you talking about?
So going back to my example from earlier, let's
Mhm.
say it's March currently, and I'm going to get together my 2020 and 2019 tax returns and a profit and loss statement through the end of February.
Mhm.
That means the P&L will be for revenue and expenses for the month of January and February, and
Mhm.
that my bank statements that I provide are going to also be from January and February.
Okay, okay. And so you can see from that bank statement income, money coming in, and then doing your expenses. So that's why it's always good. Do everything to your bank so there's no any questions, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to source and season all funds involved in a transaction, and any large deposits have to have a paper trail as well.
Gotcha. Okay, okay. So there's something here in this documentation. You have new additional documentation now required. What is that?
Same as above, except each quarter should be
On this side?
separated on the profit and loss. Oh, that's something different for jumbo loans.
Oh, for jumbo loan. So
Yeah, so they want each quarter separated. So through March, June, etc.
okay. So on
Good
that here,
question.
okay, is this the same thing? It said there's one that said a year-to-date audited P&L as the most recent month's preceding application.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yep.
have they have to be audited P&L.
No, it doesn't need to be an audited P&L, and that's why the bank statements are going to coincide with the self-prepared or CPA non-audited P&L.
Okay.
I sort of skipped over the audited piece, and I apologize, because 9 times out of 10, an audited P&L is going to be far more time consuming for a CPA, and they're going to charge you for it.
Mhm.
So I personally haven't even seen one this year. Every one I've been getting has been either the CPA prepared it, but it's not audited,
It's not audited.
or the applicant prepared it themselves.
Okay, okay. So looking at this checklist, the biggest difference when you compare with the uh, people that are W-2 employees, always the documentation. So if you're self-employed, definitely you need to be in business at least 2 years, right?
Yes, that's correct. That's typical that 2 years worth of tax returns are required. Mhm.
Okay. So let me ask a scenario. If you're W-2 employee in 2019, right? You
Mhm.
W-2, you get your W-2 employee in 2019, and 2020, you change over to self-employed. Now you get a 1099, and now you want to buy a house in 2021. How is that going to work?
That could potentially be a challenge since
Okay.
a 2-year history is normally required.
Is normally required. Okay, so definitely if you're doing that, you want to either wait till you're 2 years self-employed or buy your house before you change if you have that 2 year history of W2 employee, right?
Yeah, and with W-2 income, a 2-year employment history is required for
Mm,
full-time income. It
mm.
doesn't necessarily have to be from the same employer, but
Okay,
specific to self-employed and or 1099 borrowers, a 2-year history of receiving that income is typically required.
okay. So, okay, so that is the bottom line for self-employed. This is a checklist. I think okay, the other thing I want to ask is, during this time when people are doing their taxes, I tell people that I know, buyers that are self-employed, be careful when you expense everything out, because when they look at the uh, your taxes, you may make like 200,000, but if you expense everything out, what is that going to do to loan? If you expense, everything is expense, and then at the end of the day, maybe your net income is like 50,000. Can they, what they approve for, can it be based on that 50,000 or the 200,000 gross that they actually make?
So the gross is not going to be used for qualification purposes. And I'm
Exactly.
not an underwriter, but I would say, look at the 50, going back to your example, the 50,000, if that was the net. And
Mhm.
then there's some other things that can be factored in from my understanding. But again, this is why when it comes to applying specifically for purchasing a house, I
Mhm.
highly recommend everything be submitted upfront
Mhm.
and reviewed by underwriting so that we know that the financing is solid.
Exactly, or what you qualify for. Okay, yeah, definitely. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense to go out and look at a house when you don't have pre-approval, especially if you're W2 employee. So
Yeah.
option.
And one thing I wanted to mention, Keji, is that we're now offering our Red Arrow Approval Express, which is a fully underwritten pre-approval. Certain restrictions apply to that. But what that means is not only has credit been verified, but income and assets have all been verified by an underwriter, not just myself as the loan officer.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that could potentially be advantageous to people given the market conditions. It could mean potentially having a faster settlement turnaround.
Mhm.
And in a multiple bid situation, if you've got a fully underwritten pre-approval versus other folks making an offer on the same property and they're only pre-approved, that means your offer is stronger.
Okay, yeah, but you just said potential. It's actually no potential. It is a must, because the worst thing that can happen is for you to be under contract and then surprise happen. Nobody has time for that. So it's always good, like you said, to make sure everything goes through underwriting so that when you do get an offer, you're going through the process, there's no surprise, right? I mean, that's
Correct.
absolutely 100% on
Absolutely.
my side. Yeah, that's why I like working with you, Deanna. I don't have time to play with anybody. You have to get pre-approved. Okay, so let me. So the biggest thing, like we said, with self-employed is always to get your documents together. You can definitely qualify for all the mortgages that are out there for anybody. It's just your documentation that we're talking about. That's the biggest difference, right?
The documentation, that's correct.
Okay, I'm gonna stop here. So, guys, this is the self-employed borrower checklist. I have it. Deanna already provided it for me. So definitely, if you want a copy, I'll send it to you. Okay, Deanna. we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much. I appreciate you always.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, guys, if you are self-employed and you want to buy a house, definitely we have solution for you. You just heard Deanna. The most important is your documentation, and once you get things verified upfront, it makes it a smooth ride when you're buying a house. So, listen, if you're looking to buy, sell, or move, definitely contact me below. We'll take care of you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get updates once we upload a new video. Deanna, we're gonna talk again. All right.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.